Welcome to the Rabbi and the Shrink. This is Dr. Margarita Guri, Dr. Red Shoe, and my very favorite rabbi,
Yonason Goldson.
Thank you, Rabbi, for always being with us. And today we're super psyched. We have with us Rosemary Ravinal, and she is an international consultant. She was in the world of broadcasting. She's been all over, and I'll tell you more about it. But welcome, Rosemary. Thanks for being here.
It's really a delight. Thank you.
The delight is ours and the audience's. Today, she has been with Univision. She has been the spokesperson for Fortune 100 companies. She's worked with profit and nonprofit, all in the United States and the Hispanic countries in Latin America. She left Univision, and now what she's doing is using all of her expertise to help all of us figure out how to present ourselves powerfully and authentically in our own little squares. Rosemary, so what does ethics have to do with presenting oneself on Zoom?
It has everything to do with presenting ourselves on Zoom or whatever video platform you choose, because it's about our authenticity. How we show up can make or break our careers, our reputations, and you know how difficult it is to fix them once they are broken. So this is really high stakes. Every time we turn on our cameras and join a meeting, we are putting out our best selves. So there's a lot of ethics involved in that.
So what are some of the mistakes that you see people making that harm their brand and their authenticity, their credibility?
Sure. If we go back to last year, when people were looking at this as, I'm talking about lockdown, as a temporary thing, right? Oh, I'm just going to turn on the camera. There's kids running around in the background. There's somebody mowing the lawn. I'm in my sweats. I haven't even combed my hair today because I've had back-to-back meetings. There was a sense of this being temporary, so that there was very little attention paid to the quality of the connection, the way you show up, what you're saying with your nonverbal language, in addition to how you energetically connect with others through the camera. So it was almost taken as, this will pass. Soon we'll be getting in our cars or going to work, in offices again. So we're not going to bother doing much to improve the way we are interacting. Lo and behold, a year later, we're still doing it. And now there is a lot more involved because we're going back into mixed settings where people are physically co-located in addition to those who are working remotely. So how we come across, how we connect with others, how we energize meetings in a way that everyone feels that's equitable, that everyone has a voice, and that the information that is shared is relevant, it's concise, it's coherent, all of the ethical considerations for communication are really magnified in this setting.
You remind me, Rosemary, that if you've ever seen a movie of a production company making a movie, and you see
company? Okay, fascinating. Tell me more.
Very often if you get a DVD, they still have those. There will be extras, and some of the extras are how they made the movie. Right. So you'll see a wide shot, and you'll see the set as a set, and it looks so artificial. And you wonder how could this possibly be convincing? And then when you watch the movie, it looks absolutely real. And it's always intrigued me that there is this almost an element of deception in creating an illusion of reality. And so when we talk about being authentic, you were just talking about the backgrounds and what's going on behind us, as cleaning up the distractions, cleaning out the clutter. How is it that we can somehow contrive to be authentic? It seems a little bit like a contradiction in terms.
Sure. It is, you're right. We have grown up, and I think, this goes back to the very early days of not only television, but film, when we became accustomed to seeing things in a rectangle, right? That was how we perceived the world. So how we saw it, the world, life on a screen, is the way we related to the broader human experience. And now we find, but we were not the protagonists. We were not in that rectangle. We were observers. And now we are the actors. We're in the rectangle. So my God, what do I do? How do I interact with these, these parameters? How do I show up? How do I speak? How do I gesture? How do I use the nonverbal, not only the nonverbal of my gesturing and my facial expressions, the nodding, the hands, the body, but everything in my shot speaks to who I am. So in a way, it's like creating a set. But the authenticity part is that you populate the rectangle with things that are true to who you are, that are true to your brand, that really reflect who you are as a person, reflect your company's values, your company's products. There are all kinds, there's multiple ways of really using the space to tell another story, because you know that more than 60% of the way the human brain perceives information or data is nonverbal. It's really the visual that carries the greater weight. I think it even goes up to 90% of the way we process data is more acutely focused on the visual than the auditory. So the visual impact of how we show up is crucial, and people need to step up and recognize that it's in their control what they can do with it.
Yeah, and so on the same lines.
Pardon? I'm sorry, Rabbi.
That's fine. No, I just wanted to follow up. The doctor and I were talking before we came on about the idea of, in some ways, we want to be true to ourselves, and at the same time, there may be aspects of ourselves that we aren't completely comfortable with, or we may have aspirations that we want to achieve, but we're not there yet. Today we're in a culture that's very sensitive about hypocrisy, especially young people. Am I being somewhat hypocritical if I set standards, or I espouse standards that I haven't reached yet? Or if I filter elements of myself because I don't feel that they're attractive, is that inauthentic?
Well, how would you show up to a physical meeting? Would you show up with running shorts? What, unshaven? Well, you don't shave anyway, Rabbi. I mean, but if you did, oh yeah, okay. So how would you show up to a physical meeting? I mean, it's the same thing. You wouldn't show up ill-groomed, right? Underdressed. You would be respectful to the people with whom you're meeting by being appropriate to the occasion. So there is, and there are some liberties we can take when we manipulate how we show up in the rectangle. But I would rather go to the fact that people don't use it. I mean, if people want to use a virtual screen to say, oh, I'm in Paris, look at this, I have the Eiffel Tower behind me. The minute I move around, you'll see that I'm not necessarily there, because it's going to show that I'm just an image in front of another image, and it's going to give me away. So you can pretend, but I wouldn't tell you. If I had Paris in my background, I wouldn't pretend that I'm in Paris. I'd say, hey, I didn't know what else to put here, but I just thought it was a nice image, because we're going to be talking about something that's related to French bread, whatever it is. You follow? But you can be playful with it. You can be more whimsical, because there are so many tools available now and going forward. There's things like holograms, and there's ways of putting us in different locations, like we're actually sitting in a chair. Microsoft Teams, even Zoom. Most of the software companies are stepping up and saying, oh, we're going to create this almost like being there. We're going to create this sensory thing where like you're in the chair in the conference room. So there's more of that coming. And I think it will evolve as more people recognize that you don't necessarily have to be in a location in order to get the work done. You can have a flexible schedule so that people can be more respectful of their obligations to family, to children, to elder care.
I really like that, as we are different. I'm sorry, Doctor, just one final point here, if I may. we are different people in different contexts, and the context really determines how we show up.
Right.
Absolutely. Beyond that issue of people lying, that's one of my pet peeves, people pretending they're in their yacht when we know they're in their bathroom. And what's wrong with being in a bathroom if that's the best room for your family? You know, the sound may not be the best, but, you know, I think reality is something that authentic leaders work with. Beyond that, you're an expert in human nature. You're an expert in how people present themselves in various broadcasting formats. Here's one of the things I wanted you to address. I've been disheartened, and I know the rabbi has been too, and all of our loyal listeners. Why is it that people feel that it's okay to misrepresent facts in more and more on their little screens in order to make a point or to be right? What happens to the truth when somehow we're not face to face?
It's so easy to lie when you don't look at the person in the eye. I'm looking at a camera and I am envisioning that you are inside that camera, but you're really not. I'm not as accountable because I don't have to face up. There is more distance between us.
Yes.
And so therefore I can take liberties to stretch the truth. An example would be, you know, I hear from friends who are using online dating apps. And
Yes.
I might hear from a gentleman who would say, you know, women just don't put their real photos on there. Not only do they lie about their ages, but they don't use current photos. I went on a dinner date and the person who walked past my table looked nothing like the person, you know, whose profile I liked. And it was highly disappointing. And obviously the whatever possible relationship was there sort of eroded because there was distrust. You lied to me. You know, you look grossly different from the way you appear in your profile. So already it's ruptured, right? So, but it's so easy to create personas, and social media has encouraged us to create personas that are fantasy, because that's the way, you know, the avatars that we create for ourselves. So there's a great deal, I think, of harm that's been done by overuse of social media, where we can hide behind those profiles.
I think there's an element of what you mentioned that in some ways here in this context, there's a big advantage, or it's a lot easier to be a man. You know, I run my hand through my hair, straighten my tie, and I'm done. And I know that I've been in meetings where people sometimes have their pictures up instead of their cameras on, and it's like, these are two different people. Right. I mean, clearly some of these photos are taken professionally, and they may be several years old, and they look nothing like the people on the screen. And it is disconcerting. It is. This feeling that you really aren't presenting yourself in a way, and I can understand why it happens, but it's sort of it's just awkward.
It is. One of my favorite cartoons as a child was the Jetsons. And one of my favorite things is Judy Jetson had this thing that she would put up. She had the video calls, and she would put up this image of her face that was all made up and stuff. And in real life, her hair was a mess, and she didn't have lipstick on or whatever. And I think that's kind of where we are. We also have filters now in Zoom, where you could put eyebrows and a beard and change the light and all sorts of things. And the whole point is how to present our best self. And I think, Rosemary, I've heard you talk about that. The point is to represent your best self, not to lie, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Rabbi, you talk about profile photos, and everyone should have one, because otherwise what will be in the black tile, I should say, is just your name or phone number. But if you're going to show up in a video meeting, you need to have your camera on. And I stress this to my clients who call on me for advice on how to run better meetings and how to do team building and how to have executive presence on virtual calls. You've got to turn your camera on, because otherwise and I've done this, just say, if you can't turn on your camera for some really significant reason, then get off the call. Get off the call. I mean, you don't belong here unless you can participate fully. That's one. Secondly, it's, by the way, there's nothing wrong with audio only calls. I mean, we survived for decades with teleconferences, right? And we were able to get things accomplished. But if you're going to do a video call, you turn on your camera. The other thing about profile photos, and this always just really stomps me, how people can use old photos meaning old photos significantly different from the way they look now. I mean, you can go into a Walgreens and have a photo taken for $10, a passport picture, let's say, but you can, in other words, we have iPhones that have 3 cameras, right? And all of these wonderful features for taking portraits. You can have a current portrait taken and use a current photo. I mean, there's no need to go into expensive photo studio. That's always an option. But what I'm saying is it's sloppy, right? And it's careless. And to me, it shows a lot of disrespect, lack of respect, and lack of respect for the other people that you're not showing up as you really are.
So Charlotte brings up a great point, though, with COVID. Not everyone's been able to tame their hair with the professional hairdresser. Like, I cut my own hair, and I always wonder, sometimes it turns out better than others. This is my COVID cut. And so some people, though, have harder hair to manage. And so they have these beautiful lion's manes or these fros, or, it's like what they want or don't want. And so I'm seeing that some people are just embarrassed to present themselves on camera, which goes to Malcolm's question is it rude, which you addressed a little bit, to go on without your camera and or microphone? Is it actually rude? If it's a video meeting, you say that it's not optimal, but is it rude? It's
tremendously rude. Tremendously rude. I would ask that person to get off the call. Get off the call. I mean, if in a webinar, of course, we know it's different. We're not expected to see the people who have joined as audience. But if you are asked to be in a meeting and you are asked to contribute and you have a stake in the outcome, or it's a forum for discussion and you're expected to weigh in on something, you've got to show up. You have to. You can be a little bit ingenious about the way you do your hair. No one expects you to be, salon ready, but at least you can wear something attractive. Beyond that, we know from decades of studies, particularly in telemarketing, that if you're dressed for success, it will come up through your voice. You will be more confident. If you are embodying the interview suit that you're wearing during a remote interview, a video interview, you will be much more like you are in a professional setting. So it has tremendous psychological advantages if you are dressed for the part. So you may not realize it, but it will come through in your vocal quality and in your body language.
And I love that the rabbi always puts on his jacket. He's got his shirt, his tie, his jacket. He always looks ready for professional engagement. And I appreciate that about him.
I mean, I wear a tie 7 days a week. And I do it because if I present myself to myself as a professional, I mean, I work in my home office all day. It's really easy to find things to do that aren't work. And so anything I can do to convince myself that I need to be professional is going to help me. But I really love the message here, Rosemary, that in other words, I want to be the best version of myself. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing inauthentic about that. It's having standards. It's wanting to be refined. It's wanting to improve every day. And anything we can do to make ourselves more committed to reaching a higher ideal, I think is really the essence of authenticity.
I would agree with that. Mary points out that she knows a realtor who's been using the same photo for 25 years. I'm not sure I would be comfortable doing business, whether it's at a dating app or a professional business, with someone who doesn't take the time to love themselves as they are now, right?
True, true.
It's not just about lying. It's, we want to be with people who love themselves and who respect themselves and others enough to not waste any energy on a lie or a pretense, correct?
Yeah. And it goes to the fact that some people might hide behind being digitally inept, right? Oh, I don't know how to work this, or this is too complicated. But that's all just, nonsense, because you don't have to be a digital native. You can learn. And I have a good friend who's also a PR professional who teaches seniors. I mean, seniors meaning people in their 70s and 80s and 90s, how to use Zoom as a way to build their communities and feel more connected to the world. And they step up, they learn how to turn their cameras on, the sound, and how to do this and how to do chats. And they know, because it's possible to learn. I mean, there's no barriers, really. There's no barriers to doing this properly.
It's a new culture, really, the virtual culture. We have a lovely compliment for you, Rosemary. Are you ready?
Sure, ready.
Aya says she likes the background full of flowers, and that you look like a flower as well.
Thank you. Thank you. But I curate this. And I have things on casters. So the plant to my left is on casters. I move it around. And the sunflowers have become a sort of a brand for me, because I started using them early on, and people, when I don't use them, say, well, where are your sunflowers?
When I see sunflowers, I think of you, Rosemary.
And I don't know if I started it, but I've been seeing a lot of sunflowers around on network cable news. So maybe I started something. They're big, they're bold, they're very colorful. They hold up on these kinds of video, whether it be sharp or not. The color really comes through. So everything's rolling around. So it's almost like a set. So I move things around, because if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to move very much without tripping on something. But I curate it. I set up my camera, make sure that the lights are good, that I'm centered, and it takes just 5 minutes to make sure that that's done. Because when I sit here, I'm ready to be as professional as I can be. So that's why. Thank you.
And you have also taught everyone else how to curate this. There's the Zoom score that you've trademarked with the 10 essential elements of professional video meetings. Could you please explain to us how we can all get a top Zoom score?
Sure. There are certain essentials. So you have to have your camera on. You have to be well lit and well framed. There's still so many people who show up with light behind them. So what happens when you're backlit, then you are in shadow and you can't be seen. People don't realize that. Or you have to have the right eye level, right eye angle, so that you're not looking down at the lens or looking up. You're straight on, as if we were having a face-to-face conversation. You want to have good quality sound. You want to be heard and not have this tinny kind of echoey sound that's so common with the early days of Zoom. You want to have a staging and styling, things that are appropriate to what you mean to say, right? So that it is reflecting of who you are. And you want to have a sense of personality, warmth. So for example, I encourage people to have some hints and cues about their passion. If you're a baseball fan, if you love to play guitar, if you're music, if you have favorite films, you might have some movie posters behind you. They work beautifully to start conversations. So you may see someone who has a Detroit Tigers mug or something, and you say, oh, I love that team, it's my favorite team. And then you have reminiscences about different games, and it starts a human conversation. So all those things are important. So there's 10 different factors, from the technology to the way you interact with the camera, that basically establish a baseline. But first and foremost, you got to show up, you have to have your camera on, and you have to know how to work the technology so that you're not on mute, right? So that you are not clumsy, and when you show up as your best.
Well, we all know this, because it's so much of the culture now to talk about branding. And really, the way we appear on the screen is part of how we brand ourselves. If I'm incompetent with the technology, I'm making a statement about my own capacity. But beyond that, you mentioned that the sunflowers, people ask you about them if they're not there. And our friend Dave Bricker told me, and if I get the story wrong, he'll correct me, that his headshot is holding his glasses and tipping them like this. And those happen to be his reading glasses. And so when he shows up without the glasses, people ask him, "Where are your glasses?" Because they've come to identify him. And he said he actually had to get a pair of glasses that weren't corrected so that he would be true to his own brand. Now, I don't see that as being deceptive or
he
dishonest.
takes the lens out so it doesn't shine.
They have no lens.
Right.
No lens, yeah.
Yeah, on the screen.
And
so it's not,
smart.
again, we're coming back to this idea that it's not being deceptive. It's having a certain persona that is the best possible representation of who I truly am, without deceit, without being dishonest.
Right. And it goes to trust, right? Because if you are consistent every time, it builds trust. Hey, I know what I'm going to get. It's like buying that product. When you open I can't even think about the Ritz cracker box, you're going to get a Ritz cracker in a cylindrical thing, and it's going to taste a certain way, right? But if they change it on you and they make it, a different form factor, then you're going to say, is this really it? I mean, is this the brand I've been buying for 50 years? So it breaks the continuity.
It does. Well, everyone who's listening, Rosemary wrote a book, The Joy of Thinking Out Loud, and she is got a master's degree in global strategic communication. What question do you have for this woman who is uniquely positioned to help you shine in your own little Hollywood square? What questions do you have for her?
Oh, we're waiting. We talk about communication.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I wanted to say about what Margarita just did. I encourage people that whenever you join one of these sessions, always make your presence known. So if there's a Q&A box, if there's a chat box, simply just put, "This is Rosemary from Miami, good to be here." Just say present. Even if you don't have a question, just state who you are, because that just creates a sense of the room. You've opened up the room. That, Harry from Tucson is here, whatever. I'm just making this up. And that you have a sense of, you can visualize all these points on a map, and that you're there with all these people. It gives you a sense of community. And so whatever meeting you join, I always make it a point, even if I don't have a relevant question, just say, "Thank you, that was great, that was interesting, I'm so glad to be here." And say present. That's all, say present. And these platforms allow you to say present in different ways.
And I have to say, our live viewers, every Tuesday at 12:30, our live viewers who show up are very good at making their presence known, but not in an obnoxious manner. So one of the ways some people make their themselves known as active narcissists, where they have to comment on everything and take up more of the writing. So after a while, you can't even, you see their name and you roll your eyes. So our guys here, our listeners, are like the best. They must have read your book and I give them a good Zoom score on that. So you don't have questions for this genius, huh? She is positioned as a brand expert, helping people present themselves with public relations.
So the people don't have questions. The number one question I get is, should I use a virtual background? And do I need a green screen? That question hasn't come up. What's your answer? Huh? If you're going to use a virtual background, use a green screen. And there are green screens available that are under $50, and you can attach to the back of your chair, and you can move it around to different places depending where you are. But don't take it for granted, because when you start to move around in that setting, you will look like an amoeba, because it's very rare that you can find a really neat, crisp image when you're using a virtual background.
Yeah, otherwise the hand disappears, and that's kind of awkward. Sue has a question for you. How do you feel about recording calls?
Oh, recording calls?
Yeah.
How do I feel about it? Well, I don't do it without permission. So when I do lead a workshop, I ask for permission. And I'm very careful about that because I don't want to be repurposing the content and then have people's images, likeness without their authorization. Recording it for training purposes, I think is essential because it acts as a visual record of what happened. And then it allows people who were not able to attend to, to benefit from the information.
And what is the best way to advise people ahead of time? Like in our waiting room, we have that you're going to be recorded. If somebody comes in late, they don't necessarily get the waiting room. But I did set the settings so that anyone will get the message that we're recording. I don't know if they get it. Whoever came in late, please put in the chat if you did get notice that we're recording, just to make sure I did that right. Mm-hmm. So what is the best way to let people know what you're doing with the content?
Well, it's, if you see my name at the bottom of my rectangle, you can see Rosemary Ravinal is my name, and that's my website, rosemaryravinal.com. You can opt in to receive my weekly newsletter and to be informed as part of my inner circle of upcoming free workshops. I am doing at least one a month, which is an open forum for people to come and ask questions about how to improve their Zoom score. And then I do a lot of private, small teams, corporate, one-on-one with executives who need to polish up their public speaking online. So that's the kind of work, and I do it in both English and Spanish, by the way. So if you follow me, you'll find all my social links when you go to my website. You will be the first to receive information about what I'm doing. Like today, I put out a newsletter that goes back to the fundamentals of public speaking, which is about word whiskers and fillers. The well, you know, it's like, and all of these that we use repeatedly, and people don't realize it. And it's just taking a lot of it just takes the oxygen from the room, really, when you use them that often. And we all use them in some way or another. It's just not using them a lot.
So Mary wants to know, have you ever used artificial intelligence software to record and evaluate meeting content?
No, I haven't. I know it exists, and I know the vendors who are doing great work in this area, but no, there's no need for me, and perhaps my clients at some point will need it. But no, that is important in some circles, and the technology exists and is very affordable.
I can circle back around for a second. Talking about the authenticity of that we present. I think that there's a challenge we have today, and we see it in the media, we see it really all over the place. The relationship between the message and the messenger. And that we see that people are quick to discredit a message because of the messenger. Mm-hmm. And that it doesn't matter how I articulate the message is. Once I don't give credibility to the person who's saying it, we see people just shut down. And just in the headlines the last couple of days, and we don't get political here, but there has been increasing discussion of evidence that COVID actually came out of a Chinese lab. Now, whether or not it did, what they decide eventually, but it wasn't that long ago when individuals who expressed that idea were ridiculed, were called conspiracy theorists. We have to be willing, don't we? And we talked about this a little bit before. We have to be willing to entertain points of view that may not appeal to us.
Right.
We may be willing to hear people that we don't like, that aren't coming from where we're coming from. If we're going to be true, if we're going to be committed to truth, then we have to allow that communication to go back and forth, regardless of where it's coming from.
It is a tenet of ethical communication that we respect different points of view, and that we adhere to credibility, to the truth of what we say. But we have to be accepting of different life experiences, different political inclinations. In other words, not everyone is like us, but we also have to develop an empathy muscle so that we can understand where people are coming from, because that helps us better understand and respect their worldview. And that ultimately, I think, is how we can all coalesce and be a better society. But no, but what your question, Rabbi, points to the Greek origins of rhetoric, right? Ethos, pathos, and logos. The three elements of ethos being appealing to credibility, to truth, and then pathos being connected to the emotion part, and then logo being into what was it? Into logic, into the logic of it. So it's these are the three pillars of good communication.
Well, and John Molidor, who was the president of National Speakers Association, and he's in our chapter in Michigan, one of the things he's calling everyone who speaks, and now anyone, whether it's on a big stage or a little square, check your facts, research, because we often say things that someone said. So let's say the rabbi and I make up a false fact, and then you repeat it, and then they repeat it. And pretty soon we take it as truth. And whether it's on purpose or not, I think that we have interfered with credibility by sloppiness of assuming someone else is the arbiter of truth or facts.
And respecting people doesn't mean that we have to agree with everybody. We can be firm in our positions. We can be, forceful at times in expressing our thoughts and our points of view, and still have it done with civility, with respect, and with an openness to hear the other side, because sometimes we don't have our facts straight. Sometimes we don't have all the information.
Or we think we do, but have been sloppy. Charlotte
Yes.
made a good comment that she loved what you had to say, Rabbi, about minority voices being discredited for years because they found no credibility by virtue of being minorities and different. And I think that Rosemary and you made that point very well. Right. So now I think we're to the point where we have the word of the day, Rabbi.
The word of the day is stultify. Stultify means to cause a loss of enthusiasm, often through ridicule or causing embarrassment, which I think speaks very much to what we were just talking about. If I don't agree or like a point of view that somebody else presents, I can run them down. We've talked about sarcasm before. And studies have shown that people believe that sarcastic people are more intelligent.
Really?
And that's a really troublesome fact to me, because it encourages us to be sarcastic and not necessarily addressing the content of the message at all. I'm using a rhetorical device to discredit the speaker, to discredit the idea without actually engaging. So we should be careful not to be stultifying just because we may not immediately recognize the value of others or their ideas.
I have to write that one down. Stultify. Love it.
Sorry, I had to mute myself, and I put it in the chat, the definition. So Rosemary, we've been talking, and clearly you're a credible person. I think you have so much to offer. I think everyone should go to your website. I put the link in the chat. I'm going to put it in again just now. You have on-demand courses. You have all sorts of offerings. What is a final call to action or word of wisdom for our listeners everywhere?
To continue to learn, have a philosophy of continuous learning. Every time you initiate a call or participate in a call, try to do it a little bit better each time. Try to find that sweet spot where you know that you are showing up as your best. Play around with different colors, for example. There's different colors that show up well on camera and others that don't. Find that place where you can sit, where you have good lighting, where you know that you're going to be properly showing your features, and most of all, that you can smile and be seen, and be real And if you make a mistake, we will all make mistakes in this setting. I've had meetings where I've been presenting and my internet has gone down. You wait a few minutes and then you try again and you pick up where you left off. These things will happen. But most of all, people want to connect with a real person, be as human as you can possibly be in virtual.
I can't say anything but bravo. Anytime I talk to Rosemary, I always learn something new. And I think that this whole idea of authenticity, you'll excuse me, my dog's being authentic. My dog loves the UPS guy who just came to the door, and my granddaughter got it. I think the whole thing for me is how to present, as the rabbi said, the best version of yourself without feeling or presenting yourself like a liar, but just as a professional. Because as my father once say, mi vida, my darling, my life, you don't have to be authentic. If you were authentic, you'd be picking your nose. That we want to present the best version of ourselves. And I think, Rosemary, you certainly teach people how to do that. So I urge everyone to think about, how are you presenting yourself in the images, the sounds, the words, the facts? And what can you do to be somewhat better, as Rosemary said, a little bit better each time in how we connect? So I'm going to ask one last word of wisdom, though, for you. Many people are shy and don't want to ever have their camera. What do you say to them? Because I think it's easier to be in person with someone than to know it's going to be recorded and forever, have your visage and your voice recorded. What do you say to the shy people? How do we call them out into the light?
Don't show up, don't join.
Don't join?
Don't
Really?
join.
Not have so it's better to totally be absent than to just be a disembodied voice?
It's like going to a dance and you're not dancing, right?
Yeah, but you can always meet people at the punch
Okay,
bowl.
then maybe that's a bad example. Going I don't know, going up a mountain in a ski slope and not skiing down. It's like, why are you here? Why are you here? Why did you register for the webinar? Why did you? Well, with a webinar, it's not crucial because we can't see them and they're not expected to be there. But with a regular meeting, why are you joining? Now, if it's the kind of agenda where there's more of an encouragement, if you just want to listen, that's fine. There are some people who, when they set up their meeting, their settings, in other words, their parameters, they basically don't show those people who are not on camera, who don't have their videos on. So they become basically non-existent. So there are ways, but if you have intention of taking a part, if you have something to say, you have to use your camera. You have to show up. And you can do it with your iPhone. It doesn't have to be an iPhone 12. It can be an older model. It can be your tablet. There's so many ways of participating, and it doesn't have to be the best crisper HD 4K shot. It can be just a standard clear image of you.
And there you have it from an expert. I would say this, though, that as someone who used to be pathologically shy, I recognize this is not the way I wanted to be. And I consistently put myself in uncomfortable situations. All the gurus tell us we have to get out of our comfort zones. Mm-hmm. And one way to do it is by nudging ourselves into areas that are a little uncomfortable. And if we do that gradually over time, then we suddenly discover after a while that we don't have those same impediments, and we actually have blossomed into truly more authentic and better versions of ourselves. Well, there you go. And I know some leaders have followed, Rosemary, your point of view that since they themselves were shy, they just have auditory meetings, and then everyone is on the same footing. So I think your point about if you're going to show up, match the format of the place to represent yourself well. So that's a good thing to say. All right, everyone. Thank you, Rosemary. You're amazing. I put your website, Rosemary Ravinal, in the chat. We will have it in our YouTube and our audio podcasts as well. And we will see everyone live next Tuesday at 12:30. And
You can join us on our Vimeo, YouTube, and all our audio podcast formats. You all take care and remain ethical.